What if big portions of the internet were no longer accessible to you or your business? That sounds scary, doesn't it? Well, it all depends on your strategy for IPv6, because it could be your reality. We cover all of that and more right now. Hey guys, welcome. It's another TechWise TV, and my name is Rob Boyd.
And I'm Jimmy Ray Purser.
And today, we're talking about IPv6.
Woohoo!
I knew you'd be excited about this one.
Man, love it.
It's not the first time we've done it. Can you
Nope.
recall that we've done it how many times before?
A couple times before, because one was a viewer's choice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember
Yeah, one of the
that.
early ones. Yeah, we got one of the guys back. John Woolwine's going to be with us as well.
John's great, man.
Hey, let me ask you though, what most excites you about this topic? I mean, I don't know if we've done any topic 30
The meat and
times.
taters, baby, that technology, that aspect of it where I can look at, I've got all this IP address space, but now how do I do things like from the carrier side? How do I move from like NAT44 to kind of
Okay, you know what?
inducing...
I'm sorry. Stop. I don't mean to throw you off your game. But this is what I'm concerned about, because I think the technical aspects are, I think they have their merit. I think they're worthy, and we're certainly going to spend some time on them too.
TechWise TV.
I know, dude. But I think that there's a balance that needs to be. You know what? I don't think I'm. Guys, do you mind coming in? Hold on, back up.
Well,
Let me make her. You know these guys. Alan, Kumar, Jimmy
Yeah,
Ray.
yes, for the show, right.
Yeah. Good to see you. Thank
Good
you
to
so
see you.
much. Appreciate you guys coming in. The issue is understanding the business relevance and making sure that is a.
What?
I know, dude. Bear with me. This is part of being comprehensive. And so I thought that these guys, we're going to get a lot more detail from them here, but I just want you to remember, we're all friends here, okay?
Right.
This is all,
Yeah. It's love.
you good?
It's love.
So don't get over.
No, but there is no real business asset. There's no business point.
That's what I'm talking about.
IPv6. It's all technology.
That's the attitude I'm talking about. I'm sorry. That's what I want to address. That's what I want to cover. So hold on. Just hold that thought with me.
Yep.
Alan, let me start with you.
Yep.
What would you say is that one business reason that our audience, Jimmy Ray, but collectively, we don't want to pile on too much here. What's the one business reason that IPv6 is a hot topic? And
You know, that's the number one question I'm getting all the time. The number one reason why you want to do IPv6 is because if you do business on the internet, there are a lot of internet users that are being transitioned over to IPv6. And many people don't.
So anyone that doesn't do business or have anything to do with the internet, they don't need to worry.
Yeah, not very many people out
Yeah, I
there
was
these
trying to
days,
figure out
right?
what that list is. Okay.
So let me give you just a couple of data points. Right?
Okay.
Close to 4% of the internet users in the US, and that translates to about 8 million subscribers.
So 4% sounds low until you say 8 million.
It means 8 million just in the US are actually on IPv6 today.
Already on IPv6.
Already on IPv6 today. And that grew from virtually nothing 12 to 18 months ago, right? So it grew
See?
4%. And that comes from companies like AT&T, Comcast, Verizon Wireless.
So little ISPs.
Yeah, a few of those, right? And basically growing the customer base fairly significantly and steadily. And so if you do business with those clients, you don't want, and you stay on IPv4 only, you're going to go through some translation devices or some translation technologies that you may not want to go through to
But
connect.
it sounds like there's also this issue, are you even aware that you're not reaching them or they're not reaching you? And at what point do you become aware? There's the whole, hold that thought. I like that. Hold that thought. You hold your thoughts. Just wait.
Okay.
Kumar.
Yes, sir.
Same question to you as well, if you don't mind. And again, remember, this is all just friendly, but important.
Right.
So I want to be firm but gentle. Business reasons for IPv6, what would you say? What's top?
My answer is probably you're already doing it. If you look at the devices that you have on your network, and they took my phone away, or I'd have showed it to you.
Sorry, the crew's
Yeah,
kind of
they do
aggressive
that.
about that. Yeah.
All the latest versions of operating system that people use on a daily basis run v6, and they prefer to use v6.
Hmm?
So you go Mac OS from Snow Leopard onwards, Windows 7 onwards, Android devices, any shape, form, size of device that people use today, they try to use v6. They'll communicate device to device over a local area network using v6, whether you want to or not. And they'll also try to reach the internet over v6. So my answer is you probably
It's
already are
happening.
doing v6.
So, Mr.
Well,
Negative.
okay, all right. I mean, but we've been through some of that stuff before. the concern is, how do I manage it? What kind of gear supports it? How do I run this stuff end to end? Why I can run this in silos and stuff, I really can't lose my visibility. I mean, and
You know
from
what?
a business.
You know what? That's good. I apologize. I've been cutting him off a lot today. This is good, and I want to explore this further, and I want you to explore this further. Frankly, I know you're going to explore it further. That's what this show's about, right? Tomorrow you're going to be back up. We're going to talk more about Cisco gear, what Cisco's been doing, what we continue to do, this type of thing. And you're the man with the plan. You've got all the information on
All
the
the data.
statistics. And you're up next. In fact, I want you to stay here. We'll reconfigure a little bit here so the two of us can talk a little bit better. And guys, I want you to hang on. Alan's going to be with me next. We're going to cover all this and more. Jimmy Ray's going to cover all this and more. And we'll circle back. We'll see where you end up.
All right, man.
Because you don't always know what you don't know. And that's kind of the theme I'm starting to feel like is emerging here. So stay tuned. We'll be up on that one next. Okay, here we are, just the two of us, and I'm glad because I want to get into the details, Alan. So first, though, let's establish, we didn't get a chance to talk yet about why you're here specifically, because I've really enjoyed, as part of the research building up to today's topic and such, making sure I understood, well, what are we doing different here? You do a lot of interesting things from the IPv6 perspective for Cisco. Tell me what those are again, real quick.
So I'm actually in charge of driving what we call at Cisco the IPv6 high impact project. Right, so basically everything that relates to IPv6 transition, that's my job, is to drive it for the company.
Now, for a networking company like Cisco, surely that's not a big topic.
No, it isn't.
How many different areas does that get into?
I can't count them anymore. It's I'm actually driving a lot of the roadmaps, right? Product roadmaps across the board, really. All the way from the networking pieces all the way up the stack to security.
Oh my gosh. But this also gets into like certification, all the training and stuff that we do,
correct.
the outside evangelism that we do,
Yeah.
negotiations, how well we work with others, because we're all in this sandbox together,
How
right?
do we define the processes and those kind of things? So yes, I'm not alone though, right? There are a lot of people working with me. I'm actually driving a big virtual team.
Oh, well, that took the
IPv6
magic out of it. I thought you did this by yourself.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
No, I get a lot of help, right?
Yeah.
But I'm the one kind of trying to get the music.
No, but you're the one up taking the arrow sometimes.
Yeah.
So you were recently, because I'm following your world traveling. I can tell from your accent you're not native to at least Texas.
No, I'm not.
But I believe you're French, correct?
Yes, I am.
And but and this happened to be in your backyard. Back in February, there was a big event.
Yes.
What was that one?
February. Well, every year in February,
There's been
early
several
March,
events.
we have the World IPv6 Congress in Paris.
Okay.
Right. This has been going on for a few years now, so it's a good milestones that the entire industry is actually coming together.
And so anybody is getting together and really hashing through the issues and
Yeah.
talking through what's happening next,
Yeah.
what's been our progress. This is perfect, because I thought what we could do here is cover kind of State of the Union. And incidentally, as this show is coming out, a little bit, obviously we're taping it and then we're coming out with it. This show is coming out in June of 2013, which is really right at
Timely.
kind of the 1 year mark of, and the 2 year mark. We had World IPv6 Day 2 years ago?
So we had World IPv6 Day on June 8th of 2011.
Okay.
It was a 24-hour test, basically,
Yeah,
for
turn
the
it on
entire
and turn it
industry. Exactly.
Okay.
But everybody did it at the same time, right?
Yeah.
So if anything bad happened,
And nothing crashed that we're aware of,
Nothing crashed.
nothing big.
It
I
was-
remember
it was,
the analysis we did on that. Okay.
Uneventful, which is good. Then we did June 6th of 2012, so just a year ago, we did the World IPv6 launch. So this time it was production.
Yeah.
Turn it on, leave it on. It was
And
actually.
did anybody really do that?
Oh yeah, a lot of people did it. Actually, I'll
Okay.
give you some examples. I mean,
Well,
the biggest,
let's get into
yeah, the
that.
biggest content providers did it. The Google, the Facebook, the Yahoo, Bing, Wikipedia, and a lot of enterprises as well, and public sector, U.S. federal agencies, for example. Thousands of them, actually.
Okay, so that's the fundamental question. What I want to do in this segment is I want to find out exactly where we are.
Yep.
What's happened since then. Really put that stake in the ground today, where it is, because we're going to have you back later in the show. I want to cover another segment on trends and really what we can do to embrace this stuff. But I want to make sure we get out of this for anyone in our audience watching, technical or otherwise. Why do we need to pay attention now? We did sky is falling type stuff on previous shows before. Really doesn't feel like that's even necessary anymore. We talked about IP address starvation on IPv4. Really, addresses have run out for some people, yes?
Yeah, they did actually. They did at the central level about 2 years ago. They did at the regional level, right, for Asia Pac and RIPE, so the Europe and Middle East and Central Europe, a few months ago, and they will in the US in the coming month, right? So yes,
wow.
this is actually happening.
What are we looking at here? This is one of your tools? No.
Yeah, this is actually something that we did. That one of the conversations that we have all the time is, what is actually happening?
Yeah.
Who is deploying and why, and you have a lot of anecdotes, but nobody actually have facts and data to show. And
Yeah.
I'm a data-driven guy. I believe that
I've
in
been
order to
learning
make the
that.
right business decisions, you need to have the right data, right? So I've been collecting. I've started, kicked off that program a while back. That was one of the first things we did as part of the IPv6 High Impact project, by the way, was to kind of launch an effort to collect data that was, most of them were existing, but they were all fragmented and scattered all over the place, and nobody was collecting them on an ongoing
cool.
basis, right? So we actually started this website, which is, by the way, available as a widget as well,
Okay.
which you can download and put and publish on your website. And basically, this website gives you an idea of where IPv6 is happening. Give you a snapshot. It's updated every day, right? And it gives you an idea of where IPv6 is happening and at what stage of the deployments, country by country, people are.
So shades of green that are heavier shades obviously
Yep.
indicate a larger penetration.
Yep, exactly.
So this is active real-time stuff?
This is active real-time stuff. This is actually collected every day, computed every day, updated every day.
Okay.
All right. So basically, I can run you through that just to give you an
Please.
idea of where we are and what's happening on the internet. Obviously, I cannot see what's happening in the internal enterprise networks.
Oh, Jimmy Ray can.
Right.
He's got those stats.
Exactly. We have
we're not allowed to talk
other
about
things
Okay.
to do that. And in the case of Cisco, we have some interesting
Sure.
story
No,
to
we
tell.
don't look at that stuff.
But I can show you what's happening on the internet, right? So the one thing that we did first, we kind of defined a few metrics that we could collect and display that were representative of the different steps that you need to take to enable V6. Because
Okay.
V6 doesn't happen like this, right?
Mm-mm.
It happens first by the network, and then you enable your content, and then you enable the users, and by magic, the users go and fetch the content, right?
Okay.
So basically, we have a few metrics here. We have, so for example, if I'm gleaning over the US, they're going to give you an idea of how many transit autonomous systems. So in other words, how much
Wow.
of the core transit of the internet in the United States is actually IPv6 ready today?
58%.
58%.
That's
Right.
pretty high, it seems.
That is very high. I'll give you more details later on. How much of the content is actually reachable over IPv6 today? 44%.
Yeah.
It's not 44% of the websites, right? Because not every websites are created equal.
Sure.
Right? Google is more important than my own blog, right? Or your own blog.
Hey, speak about your own blog.
Exactly. And how many users are actually connected?
Yeah,
right?
interesting disparity here between users versus content.
Yeah, but the good news is, we kind of breaking up the kind of a chicken and egg situation that we've had, or the Mexican standoff that we had.
Yeah.
No content, no users. Why should I enable users if I don't have content? Why should I
Yeah.
enable my content if there are no users, right? So
Yeah.
that Mexican standoff is being broken apart.
Or chicken and egg.
Yeah, or chicken and eggs.
Not to
if
insult
you
our
want.
southern friends. Yeah. Got it.
Yeah, there are more than two parties. That's the reason why it's
Absolutely.
more than the chicken and eggs, right? And as you can see, this is happening at different pace in different parts of the world, right? So it's important to have a dashboard of where we are and what do we do. And you can go into the details, country by country, if you're interested. Some of them are actually growing very fast in certain part of the country of the world. Others less fast.
Well, tell me, I know you pulled a couple up in advance.
Yeah.
Tell me what we need to glean from this, because we've only got about 2
All
minutes
right.
left. And what I want to know is also, because this is interesting, I think any attempts to visualize are well respected, because I don't think that's simple. But there's stuff we can do with this information, right? It's not
Of
just
course,
for fun.
Of course. So, first of all, if you're an enterprise, right, and you wonder whether should I enable my website on IPv6, well, what are the business
is now
decision
the time.
criteria that you can
Okay.
use? Well, let's assume that you are a bank, let's say, and you do e-banking
Oh, I'd
on
love
the
that.
internet,
Okay.
right? A lot of people do that.
My wife thinks I'm a bank. Yep.
Exactly.
Okay.
So if you are in the, let me go to the user side in that case. So I can tell you that in the US, right, if you are a bank in the US and you want to enable IPv6 on your website, close to 4% of the users are already on IPv6 in the US. And that is something like, 9.5 million people.
And those are potentially people I may not have access to at all. That's a growing number
And-
that are becoming increasingly invisible if I'm not paying attention.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the other thing is, if you go and you address those users with IPv6, you're going to bypass any of the translation mechanisms that you may have to go through if you don't do this.
So you get that cleaner
Exactly.
point
It's an
nirvana
end-to-end.
sort of thing.
We restore the end-to-end
Okay.
model now, right? And there is a growing proportion. And when you have companies like Verizon Wireless enabling V6 by default on every LTE subscribers,
They've
right?
made some big steps. Yeah.
And the churn is actually happening pretty fast. Or AT&T doing it for Uverse, or Comcast doing it for all the new users. You see that ramp going up pretty quickly.
Anything else we need from here? Got about 1 minute left.
No. I can basically give you, graphs, country by country. This one is
this
actually
is-
interesting. This is
Is this
Switzerland.
this is Switzerland.
This is Switzerland.
Wow,
right?
look at that growth right here at the very end.
Exactly. You're going to see a lot of these step functions. Once the service provider decided to enable it, they're not going to do it slowly.
Yeah, it's not
People
just
think
Bob.
this is going to be, people think that it's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
When you see those step functions, it's not going to take that long. Actually, Switzerland will be at 10% next week.
And any of us involved with any kind of online business, these represent users that, well, they don't disappear because there's a period of time when they're both available, but we're seeing a migration to another network that we need to make sure we're playing
They're
as
going
part
to
of.
get
Yeah.
both, right? They're going to
Yeah.
get V4 and V6, but V4 quality is going to degrade over time,
Yeah.
right? Because it's going to get fragmented, it's going to
That's
go through
interesting.
translation. V6 is going to be much higher
So you've got a
quality.
potential audience here we need to make sure you're playing with. Okay.
Exactly.
Where's this one located?
This one is Germany, actually. So this one is interesting
Ah.
because one big ISP in Germany has decided to enable V6, and as you can see, they committed to it. They started in October, right? We are in May, and they're close to 3%.
Wow. So this is exponential, though. We're going to see much
Yes.
more of this. Final point?
Well, the
What, do you
final,
want, what people need to remember?
so enable your internet website is probably the one thing that you want to start with. Second, there's a lot of IPv6 going on within the enterprise, right? That you may not be aware of because of your people are bringing their own device. It's a lot better to enable V6 and control it and visualize it as opposed to,
It's
just
happening.
ignore it.
Yeah, it's happening already.
Exactly.
In fact, click up here real quick. I noticed you did something to our machine here. So we'll click
I
here.
actually
We'll get the
install
Bazoon in.
I actually install a very small plugin.
Oh, go back to that main page because I think it had a different
Yes,
effect, didn't
yeah.
it? Now click on it again.
Right.
Yeah, look at that. So this is all the IPv6 that's happening on our machine right here
Yes.
that we didn't even
So
know was
the
happening.
user doesn't have to know about it, right? Once IT has enabled V6 on either the Wi-Fi infrastructure or the Ethernet access infrastructure or your home network,
Yeah.
users will be on IPv6 without even realizing it. So here I've installed a little plugin called IPv4 that
Uh-huh.
basically
IPv4?
display IPv4.
Sounds
that
funny when you
basically
say it.
display the address of the servers and all the sessions that are needed to build that.
And that's
page.
just the servers, not even all the number of sessions that are
Of
going
course
out as
not.
well. Like,
Yeah,
even more. Alan, thank you so much. This is eye-opening.
Pleasure.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Kumar Reddy, welcome to TechWise TV, man.
Thank you, Jimmy Ray. It's great to be back again.
It is excellent to have you back. And and now that I got you here, I want to get a little realistic here again with IPv6 because I think that while technically speaking it sounds really cool, and we all as geeks love it, the business side of this is how do we support this in products, right?
Right.
Because IPv6 from a development standpoint is not like throwing a switch or just adding another line of code. There's a lot of folks that support this that don't really support it. They don't really support the whole package, and it's just kind of a guess. You're saying that's not how our approach to this at all.
Right, and you're bringing out a really good point, Jimmy Ray, because if you look at how you get V6 across the portfolio, a lot of focus is on features. Do I have this feature? Do I have that feature? And that's well and good, and we've got tons of features, and I know we'll go into them in a second. But it's really the process that makes you get, or lets you get a network that can run V6 in a dual stack fashion. And if you look at our own engineering process, we took a decision several years ago that we were going to ship new features and new product that supported V6 by default. So this by default thing is incredibly important because if you think about where we need to get to versus where we were like the last time I was here a couple of years ago, across the industry there were lots of gaps, right? And so we took a look at this and said, how are we going to get to pervasive V6 support? And there's basically, we had a two-pronged strategy, right? One was we're going to take customer input, look at the use cases, allow people to run product in deployment, first objective. Second is to stop digging. If you're in a hole, what do? Right? You stop digging.
Yeah, stop digging, man.
So across the industry, that was sort of where we were. And what Cisco has done is incorporated in our engineering processes, in the day-to-day, in the water that we drink, in the DNA that makes us up, to make v6 just something that we have to do. And we do it with when we're doing a new feature, we make sure that it has v6 by default, or it has v6 support coming. We have it from a test point of view. We have it from a documentation point of view. So it really is an all-encompassing part of how we build product at Cisco across the portfolio. And I think that's why we have a really, really good portfolio today, support today in the portfolio for v6.
Oh, nice, nice, because it's just part of the process. It's not like, oh, and it's v6. It's like, if it's a new feature, it's also v6.
Correct. So,
which makes a huge difference when we're looking at engineering man hours to do a project and stuff like that, because it's really scoping in that extra time instead of adding it on like Power Windows at a later date.
Exactly. And if you do that, and if you start coding and developing and testing and just make v6 part of who you are and what you do, you can really get a lot of not just basic support out the door, which we've been doing for a while, but innovation. Right? And I think one of the big things we're looking from a platform point of view is when we get to networks that are running v6, networks that are carrying v6 traffic, at some point we can let go of the v4 way of thinking. And you can look at how you do design in an easier fashion, in a more streamlined fashion, how you can take advantage of the address space, the scalability support that we're putting in the product to deal with the address space, the larger address space, that sort of thing. So that's the sort of the exciting part of the platforms.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Well, and the neat thing about that is that means that those decisions also drive hardware decisions as well. We're not tacking someone and taxing that hardware. If you're doing it like that way, your hardware is already fixed to optimize for v6. And by the way, if it runs v6, it's also going to run v4 pretty darn good as well.
That's right. And one thing, that question comes up a lot. And the basic takeaway we give people about, what does the hardware do for v6 is the laws of physics apply, right? The addresses are longer. But we are designing and building the hardware and software to optimize for v6 deployments. Okay. The places where you tend to see that most are routing table size. Definitely. Where you look at neighbor discovery scalability around the edges of the network, which are incredibly important to these larger data centers. And something that we have, for example, in XOS 6.2 is work that we've done to increase the neighbor discovery scalability, right? So that's a classic example of something that we saw working with customers, working with deployment scenarios, where you see huge numbers of hosts connected to large data centers, and you have to dimension the product appropriately.
Okay, now, so you mentioned something that's really important. I want to get to the slide here real quick so we don't run out of time. But the interesting thing you said there was working with customers. Right. Because from an engineering standpoint, it's easy to kind of get caught up in lab mentality and start putting a lot of effort into features that people are like, yeah, that looks nice on a data sheet, but I don't use that. So you're working with customers to find out how they're using all your products and then optimize based upon that type of knowledge.
Exactly. So you have a couple of phases to the delivery. So at the beginning, what you were describing is I just need to get to a point where I can use it, right? We've done that a while ago. Yeah. Now we have customers in production deploying dual stack for enterprise, in the data center, service provider. They're running this live, right? We have live customer traffic going across our devices. And that will bring us back, by working very closely with the customers, the next stage of the development, real world experience that you can't make up, right? You can't just think through it. You have to go live through it. That will help us drive enhancements in the products that go from the small, for example, the timeouts that we use for our wireless LAN solution, 7.3. We iterated to find that out over many, many months. What is the optimal set of timeouts? It sounds small, but if you're deploying that at a large network, it makes a huge difference, right?
Sir.
So out-of-the-box experience is much better. Yep. And similarly, we have a large number of customers deploying our service provider gear, right, live. And so we're looking forward to a point where we get to customer feedback, helping us guide the product development, more innovation across the board.
Nice, nice, nice. So what are we looking at here on this slide? Progress in most areas over the last 12 months. There's a lot of stuff happening here.
Oh, yeah, big time, big time. So the main takeaways are, apart from the production piece, is we've driven a lot of v6 features into the different devices themselves, across the networking layer, L2 and L3, and up the stack into the application layer and into the security layer. And I'll touch on just a couple of highlights, if I may, Jimmy Ray.
Please, please.
So one of the big highlights, and one of the signs of our commitment back to the market and back to the industry is the amount of support we have for our certification. So there are public sector agencies, a very well-known one in the US, USGV6, that have certification requirements.
Right.
We had our 100th product certified recently for USGV6.
Wow, sure enough.
Yeah, that's big. That's big. There's another standard, if I can use that word, which is called RIPE 554, and we have one of the broadest amounts of support for RIPE 554 across our product line. Right. So we've got feature support, we've got certification support. We've actually got the certification testing feeding back into our own regression tests, just to go back to the process side of things again, to make sure that once we reach a certain level, we maintain that level, right through engineering.
Nice.
We've got dual stack support for our collaboration applications. We've got customers running that in production. In security, we've got, for example, in the ASA, support for OSPF v3 with stateless failover between ASA devices. On AnyConnect, just to pick a couple of highlights, we have support for v6 over v4, v6 over v6. And one of the fun things on WebEx is we have pilot support for WebEx over v6. If you're using WebEx at one of three sites, Cisco, ISOC, or IETF, big standards bodies, you'll use v6, right? And we're obviously ramping up, just like we're doing across the board with Cisco IT services, to deploy that more pervasively. If I can keep going, you have to stop me because I'll do this for a long time.
Well, you got about a minute and a half left, so.
So let me just hit on the service provider side. So on service provider, to some degree, that is the key to unlocking traffic, right? We need to have a lot of traffic that's going to cross service provider networks, that's going to come from mobile networks specifically.
Right.
We've got excellent support for v6 on our mobile side, for LTE, and even for 3GPP. And we've got a large number of transition technologies that are available across the product line that allow customers to get from where they are today to v6 in the simplest, most scalable fashion, whether that's using tunnels, various amounts of tunneling technology, or today things like MAP, XLAT, which are going to get service provider customers to where they can run v4 over a v6 network. We often focus on the other way around. Where the puck is going is, I need to be able to migrate my network to v6, but continue to deliver service to my customers as v4.
Nice, nice. Now, let me ask you here in just the last 30 seconds we have left, because Rob is going to kill me if I don't ask this question. And truthfully, I honestly want to know, from a business aspect. Technically, I understand why we want to go to IPv6. I can explain that all day long.
Right.
Business-wise, what would I tell my manager would be a good reason to do this? Because I'm going to ask every guest I have on here. Business-wise, I got to come to you. You're my manager. What do you want to hear me? What's going to motivate you to give me the paycheck to make this happen?
There's a very easy answer that cuts across the board. Is that if you have any form of business dependency on the internet, you need to go to v6. You need a strategy to adopt v6. And whether you're a service provider, it's business critical. If you're if you're publishing content on the web, if you're a government, you're trying to collect taxation revenue across the internet. If your employees are mobile, right? All of these things depend on the internet. The internet is migrating from its v4 state for address exhaustion reasons to use v6. So that's the simple reason.
It's business survival.
Business continuity, absolutely.
Nice. Well, Kumar, it's always a pleasure to have you on TechWise TV, man.
It was great. Thanks.
Thank you, buddy. John Woolwine, welcome to TechWise TV, man.
Thanks, Jimmy Ray.
You know, I don't know if the viewers remember or not, but we had you back on here a long time ago on the Viewer's Choice segment where the viewers spoke, and they said the show they wanted to see was IPv6.
Yeah.
And here we are some years later, and we're talking about what Cisco has done to migrate to IPv6, right?
Yep, that's what we're here for.
So what do you got for us?
So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we in Cisco IT have been doing. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the very beginning of this whole journey for us, which started about 10 years ago. We brought IPv6 into the network via tunnels and overlay technologies. But a couple years ago, we started making a change. And one of the big changes we started making was the introduction of dual stack networks. So basically having IPv4 and IPv6 side by side on the network. At the same time, about 2 years ago, we started introducing our web presence. In other words, www.cisco.com, and making that accessible by IPv6 out on the internet. So as you can see here, we are actively working on our web properties today. We've got about 2% of our users coming in via IPv6 today to www.cisco.com. We've also got blogs.cisco.com enabled for IPv6 as well. So what we're starting to do is just move through our web properties, V6 enable them. We've got more coming in the near future, and I think within about a year or so we'll be in great shape there.
It's interesting you tackled the web piece here, because one of the things that I hear from customers all the time, they're looking to migrate to V6, is they're concerned about the DNS issues that this may bring. Now we know that that DNS is DNS, but still having quad A records and in-adder ARPA type records and stuff to set this, people are a little nervous about that. Did you guys run into any problems?
You know, we really didn't have any issues with DNS. What we did very early on was we made sure our DNS infrastructure was ready. It was able to serve up quad A DNS records. DNS actually is a great tool to use in the IPv6 migration, because when you want to V6 enable an application, it's just a flick of the switch via DNS. You just advertise the quad A and bam, you have IPv6 access to a web property. So it's actually works in our benefit. We like it.
Nice. Okay, good. And so what do you have here now?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about what's been happening on the internal network. A couple good points here. One is we've got our global core 100% IPv6 enabled. In other words, we've dual stacked our entire global backbone, which was the first real big step for us. On top of that, we've been making some good progress in our DMZs. We've got about 90% of all of our DMZs globally IPv6 enabled, and we're starting to move through our data centers as well. So as part of making our web properties V6 enabled, we've had to do a lot of work in our data centers, bringing V6 into there as well. So let's not forget our branch offices on top of that. We've got about 90 buildings scattered around Cisco. Our campus buildings, our branch offices, about 90 in total that are V6 enabled today. So that's both wired as well as wireless access. We're continuing to move forward there. We think we're going to get about 134 of those done by the end of this summer.
Wow.
And really what this all translates to is we've got external service providers like Google, Yahoo, Facebook that are now seeing about almost 15% of our traffic arriving at those properties via IPv6. So what that tells us is roughly about 15% of our endpoints here within Cisco now have IPv6 access. So that's a good barometer for our internal rollout of V6.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Wow. So certainly it all couldn't have been wine and roses that you just flicked a switch and it was all that stuff. Did you guys have any problems making this move here?
You know, it takes a lot of planning. I'm not going to say it's easy. It's just a flick of a switch. It's not. It does take some planning. You know, you start with the bigger, broader planning. It's not just the networking team that makes this work. It's the networking team that's typically kicking this off and getting things started. But you got the security guys who are going to come in and they want their security capabilities to be able to support IPv6. Then you've got the app teams. So a lot of people think, it's transparent to the applications. Well, in some cases it may be, but in some cases it may not be. Those applications in some cases pay attention to IPv6 addresses. So we've got to have the conversation with those people, bring them to the table and get them in as part of the planning process. So I think the big lesson for us was planning, early planning, bring everyone to the table, educate them, make them aware of what's happening, and get them on board with the plan. That's probably the first big thing I would point out.
What was the big motivator to moving to an IPv6 network? Because as a geek, I kind of see why I would want to go to IPv6 because it's cool. It's the next new thing. I mean, why wouldn't I want to go to it? I mean, it's neat. We get a whole bunch more addresses. I can do a lot more with it. I can get rid of NAT. I mean, there's some geeky pluses to that. What was your reason to do that?
Yeah, so the real motivation for us within Cisco and on our own infrastructure was, first and foremost, we have products, routers, switches, security products that are getting developed with IPv6 capabilities in them. We needed to give access to the developers, to the engineers who are building these products. We needed to give them IPv6 access so that they could, test these products, interoperate, test them, so that they had lab-to-lab connectivity or desktop-to-lab connectivity. So it was really getting IPv6 in the hands of the people that were building out the features and functionality for V6 on our products. That was the #1 driver. That started a long time ago. More recently, the big driver for us has been internet evolution. We've seen the internet start to move towards IPv6, and we've got these properties, these web properties out there. We want to make these accessible to the IPv6 internet. So about 2 years ago, we really started shifting the focus and making sure that our web properties and anything that we have that's facing the internet is V6 enabled and accessible for those V6 users out there. Those are the really two big business drivers for us.
Nice, really cool, really cool. Well, I know that, so we're dual stacking here. I mean, it's obvious when I get in, one of the things I'll do is I'll do an if config and I'll look and see that, I'm pulling both addresses from the network, and I always like that. I think that's kind of cool. Are there any tips out there besides planning that you'd like to give the engineers that are watching the show when they're looking at doing something like this?
I think that, in addition to planning, get your IP address structure laid out globally. So have a good cohesive plan so that you can lay down IPv6 once and you don't have to muck with your addressing. It stays in place and it's permanent. And there's a lot of benefits with IPv6 as far as address planning goes, because you've got a good sized chunk of address space to work with. So you don't need to be as frugal as you did with IPv4, and that means you can simplify your IP address plan with IPv6. You can give big chunks to big regions around the globe, and then subdivide those into building by building and keep a very consistent, repeatable pattern, which makes things easier for the network engineers. On top of that, the network management systems. One of the things we did early on was we made sure our network management systems were V6 enabled, so that we made sure that we had the ability to monitor over IPv6. Is our network up over V6? V4 may be fine, but is the V6 topology active and working? Well, our network management systems test that and sense that. So one of the things we did early on was we made sure that those management systems were capable of managing a V6 network. That's another key thing I'd recommend to engineers.
Yeah, no kidding, because I tell you, that has always been the real Achilles heel of V6, is that while we like all these good ideas and stuff, network management hasn't kept pace. And the fact that now that it does, that is a humongous benefit to actually get this rocking and rolling. Now, I guess two concerns of mine, real quick, and I know we've got about a minute and a half left. So are you concerned that now that you can have everybody that I'm sending IPv6s down directly to the user and they're getting out, not going through NAT or anything, are we concerned that we don't have that buffer of NAT to kind of make it at least a little bit harder for people breaking my network? I know NAT's not security, but it's just another threshold they have to leap over, right?
Yeah, so for us, we've always been comfortable without NAT masking our network topology. We were comfortable with it for IPv4. We're comfortable with it with IPv6. So for us, we don't really rely on NAT as a security capability to obscure the network topology. So for us, not a big deal. We had already gotten past that with IPv4.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Then my final thing, and like I said, we have under a minute here, but are you concerned that while it's great that we have all these addresses, and that sounds really great, there's my router people out there saying this is going to wreak havoc on summarization and making my network a lot simpler, because now I have all this massive amounts of diversity I can kind of set up on my network. How am I going to ever summarize all these routes?
Yeah, that goes back to the address plan I was talking about before.
Okay.
You nail that and your summarization is fine. If you don't pay attention to that address plan from day one, and you start mixing up your address space around the globe, you've got real problems. So you get on that early, you've got very simple summarization, at very predictable prefix lengths, it's easy.
Well, excellent. Well, John, that's fantastic, and I think the key to this is plan, plan, plan. I love it when we eat our own dog food, and we let people know that, look, we're doing this right now, so we're ringing out the problems and stuff, and I know you guys are publishing docs, it's out on the web, all that good stuff. So great stuff, man. Thanks for coming on TechWise. Really do appreciate it.
Okay, Alan, as I was preparing for this, what is now actually our final segment in a series of understanding how we totally encompass this problem, becomes important, I think, to understand what we need to respect and do going forward. Kind of looking at the trends that we try to extrapolate. In fact, I was joking with you earlier, the fact that I realize now that I'm in my mid-40s, that I'm probably having to come to grips with the fact that I'm too old to be a child prodigy. In anything, I can't find that one thing that I maybe could still be. But the reason why I make that point is the fact that there's some serious trends going on here, and we're literally, very quickly, it feels like, going to be at the point of looking back and going, what did I miss? Now I'm playing catch up for customers, for my business to business, business to consumer, whatever it may be. Yes?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting because, if you're an enterprise and you try to migrate to IPv6, right, it's a lot easier to do it when you have 3 or 4% of the users of your clients on IPv6 rather than when you have 30.
Right.
Right? And we're getting
Yeah.
to that point. If most of your clients are actually Verizon wireless clients, Verizon has actually 30% of their users on IPv6 already. So it may even be too late in certain cases, right? So
Interesting.
it's something that needs to sink into people's mind. It's the right time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't wait too long because it takes time to plan and execute. And if you wait too long, instead of having a little wave coming to you, you're going to see a big tsunami, and that's going to be a lot more difficult to manage from a security standpoint, from a scalability standpoint.
Well, one thing I've loved about this entire show is that it's actually been so much of the positive aspects of because there's not been any big negative stories as much as we did Sky is Falling
Yeah.
stuff in the past about the stuff that kind of started to feel like Y2K and the big nothing, in terms of stuff coming up, is that this stuff has already been happening. People are already taking advantage of the trends. Are ISPs looking at each other in any sense like this and going, oh, Verizon Wireless has got to jump on us now because they've made that jump and they're doing, do other ISPs look at it? Is it really more of a business story going, wow, look at all those customers now and that potential market that is now an IPv6
Yeah.
that I need to be addressing?
And on top of that, now you find people trying to realize that this is not only about IPv4 exhaustion. This is also about enabling new possibilities, right?
Yeah.
The fact that, back to Jimmy Ray's point about this humongous IPv6 address space, right? Well, guess what? Once you have such a big and large address space, there are things you can do with it, right?
Yep.
Like building semantic, service semantic, or network semantic into your address space, into your address structure. And so some customers are starting to realize that they could use V6 to do things that they've never been able to do with V4 because they were limited in what they could do with the address.
Now that's interesting because, tell me if this makes any sense at all, because on the internet, it feels like that the internet has enabled us to realize genius from groups of people working together in ways we never could have predicted, before we got there. It's starting to feel like this type of transition and what it enables, we can do our best to say this is what we think is so wonderful, but we really don't know how much this enables us to do because it's a big change into a
Yep.
still kind of uncharted area in a positive way.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, think about the Internet of Things, right? We talked about that for quite a while now. Yeah.
Beautiful. You got it on your slide.
50
I like
billion
that.
devices in 2020, right?
Right.
So, of course, you need to address those sheer number of devices. Actually, that's a humongous number.
Right.
You wouldn't be able to address that with IPv4. You would end up with a very brittle architecture, right? But if you combine that with the scalability of the massively scalable data center, the big, data center that will hold the data in the cloud, they run into the same kind of issues. They end up having to address a lot of virtual machines, a lot more than we had physical
Right.
servers, right? With IPv4, with a lot of overlapping private IPv4 address spaces, a lot of complexity, they could simplify a lot of that infrastructure by moving to V6 and presenting V4 and V6 at the edge to the end
Isn't
users.
that funny? Yeah, because as we consolidate and reduced physical
Yeah.
from this virtualization wave, we've seen it actually had the opposite effect in an addressing perspective and a networking
Absolutely.
perspective.
And it has an exploded number of entity that you need to address now.
But tell me about the Internet of Things, because this is actually a whole new area in terms of what we're starting to see from a different group, if you will,
Yep.
of networking swell. Yes?
And the thing that is very interesting about the Internet of Things is that those things, unlike a PC, a Mac, or an
Phone,
iPhone,
yeah.
not going to be able to have the logic to handle dual stack. Right?
Oh, so you're saying that everything happening with all these new devices
have-
coming network addressable is only IPv6?
It's only IPv6, right?
Oh.
A lot
So
of
these
these
sensors and things. Okay.
sensors, the smart meters, for example,
anything you
they
can think
run
of.
V6 only. They don't have the logic to be able to choose between V4 and V6, and it doesn't make any sense for them anyway,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So all the technologies have been defined to be V6 only, and so that's what the network is going to have to cope with,
Wow.
right?
So that's big. Two big trends there.
So-
Us taking over. Okay.
So the thing is, those three big trends now, the cloud and the big data centers, right, and the multiplication of virtual machines, the mobile internet on the other side, right, and the Internet of Things, all of them, if you want to build this architecture on top of IPv4 with an address space that is exhausted, right, or very close to, you're going to end up with a very brittle and fragmented architecture with a lot of transition and translations mechanisms and address sharing mechanisms.
And brittle refers to the fact that when something is brittle, obviously you push on it and it fails suddenly.
Yes.
And it fails in a bigger way
Yep.
versus kind of, being able to respond
Absolutely correct.
in a flexible manner.
Right.
Okay.
If you go to V6 on the other side, you're going to restore the end-to-end model, right? Which means that every device on this universe is going to be addressed in a unique way. Right? It doesn't mean that it is exposed to everybody, but it
Right.
means that if you decide to do so, if you choose to do so, you're not going to have to go over, multiple layer of address sharing or translation mechanisms. The end-to-end model is restored, which means that you have end-to-end connectivity, right? Global reach and unlimited connectivity. And this is a very interesting environment to be in because it opens up a lot of possibilities.
So is it fair to say, as you look at this going forward, is it, we had joked earlier parts of the show, is you just don't know what you don't know because a lot of this is happening already, but we're really at that decision point where it goes, you can either be reactive or proactive, and you really do need to be
Yes.
making that decision now.
Yes. And the other thing that I would say is that this technology has been proven. It's running in production with millions of customers and millions of users on it. A lot of the content on the internet is already available on IPv6, right? Something like 40% of the content is already available on IPv6 because it comes from Google and Facebook and Yahoo and Bing.
Right.
They all have enabled it in production about a year ago. So it's proven, it's deployed in production. It's just a matter of planning and doing it. And I think there is a business reason for doing it, as we've seen in the show.
Wow, I love that. Anything else?
No, that's about it, I guess.
Because this feels
Let's just do it,
complete.
right?
Yeah, we need to
Yeah.
move forward, and you're probably off gallivanting around the world to go evangelize this even further as well. So please keep up the good
Absolutely.
work. Thank you for joining us on TechWise.
Pleasure.
Okay, remember back at the top of the show, we had a little intervention.
Yeah.
Okay, but in all seriousness, we'd kind of come up with this idea for hitting you like this because as it started off, and as we looked back at our IPv6 shows, it was all Chicken Little, sky is falling.
Yeah, right.
And that fear factor of why you should be looking at IPv6 migration. Now, as we look at it, the feel I've got throughout this entire show is that it's not about a migration or something that's coming up. It's something that feels like it's already happened. And there's almost like the clarion call that goes, hey, do you realize this is already happening?
Right. Right.
Curious from your perspective, though, as we go through this, back to that original point, business and technology and the balance of the two, where's your thinking today on that intersection?
It's funny because, when we first started playing this show, that conversation we had up front was quite real.
Yeah.
I mean, because that was my argument. There is no business reason. You don't have a business reason to move to this.
I remember you posed that to the guys.
Oh,
and that was
absolutely,
good because we got some
absolutely.
good, you got some honest responses from
And
them.
yeah, and it's true, and that's I love being proven wrong,
Yeah.
because the truth is I honestly didn't think there was. The interesting thing here is that when we're looking at this from the business side, is that we know we're going to be dual stacking for a very long time.
Sure.
It's just kind of part of that process and stuff. This whole panic and fear factor that you run out of IP addresses, a lot of people have solved that problem years ago with NAT, and people just don't care. We don't see the effect of that, Now, it's the service providers, it's the mobile devices that are really making that change, and people wanting to run more pure IPv6 networks. That is where we're going to start losing some business, or where we need to connect up, because there's a huge advantage of going end to end, back and forth with an IP address, and not renting those addresses.
And so this is the business fear thing that I was getting out of this that I'm just want to qualify again with you, is the fact that it started to become obvious to me that there's this whole nother network being built. I'm not sure if that English is good or not. But the idea is that there's this whole thing building up out of necessity, and it's happening now on whole country, whole ISP type basis. And it's, of course, happening more rapidly with mobile devices as they're getting onto the network.
Yeah.
And it's happening with people that had the IPv4 exhaustion issue much earlier. But what that means from a business perspective is that one, you could be missing communication that you're not even aware that you're not even hitting certain major markets like India and China, being mentioned. I'm like, well, those aren't small markets.
Yeah, no.
I think you had even mentioned, you think about where all the finance, who's got money to lend.
Yeah, those
these
are two
days.
lender countries, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So very important to a lot of people. And so you think about your ability to communicate with them at all, or at least very efficiently, because it's another language, right? So it's
Yeah.
communicating. So hit it for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big piece here, is that when it comes to looking at this from a business standpoint, is that standard engineering practices are still not let go just because there are some good business practices.
I didn't think it was an exclusive, yeah.
No, and the piece of this is to understand, which what we talked to John, from the IT piece here, is that planning is the most critical thing here. Now, again, we know that on every project. You plan, then you plan again and stuff.
Where does that start with this, though? I mean, what does planning mean? If I'm sitting here and I've got my network, maybe it's mapped, maybe it's not, maybe I'm not in control. I mean, where do they start with something?
There's a lot of misconception about IPv6 and that the things that it brings to the table, that it brings security, that it brings routing optimization, that it brings these whole new things. And what it does is it solves the IP address problem. The addressing problem we had in V4, that's what it was designed to do.
That's really what it was about, yeah.
And that's what it's all about and stuff. Everything else is pretty much about the same. I mean, really, realistically, so it's important to make sure that my people understand and they're trained accordingly. It's important that my applications can speak V6 or at least have some fallback mechanism either way, that my services being DNS, that type of stuff, is connected up and using. Now, John said he didn't have any problems with that, but, I'm telling you, in the deployments I've seen, that's been a very big issue.
Yeah.
And so it's important to make sure I've got my timeout set correctly. There's a bunch of different DNS flavors out there to make sure you have those records up to date and set in there correctly and you're using the right records, because there's been a few updates to these records and some others have been depreciated. So we want to make sure we're actually starting out on the right foot.
Hey, worst case scenario, are Cisco partners prepared to receive a phone call from their client or potential client saying, help me with this first step, help me figure out what I need, get my head wrapped around what I need to be doing for, how far into this do I need to be? Because it's not an overnight switch by any means. Is that something they can call on partners for?
It's been my experience that the Cisco partners that I've worked with are actually fantastic at understanding that stuff, because one of the things that they're asking for continuously is IPv6 specialization and understanding that. Cisco has obviously taken the next step and included IPv6 only used to be in the CCIE. Now it's all the way down to NA.
Oh, yeah.
So
that makes sense.
We've taken the steps to actually arm our partners to be ready to go and do this stuff. They're fantastic for doing inventory, for discovering what equipment
Who's got time for that
ready.
on a regular IT department, right? Everybody's already wrapped up.
It's a real pain.
It's an extra thing.
But it's critical.
Yeah.
I mean, you cannot do
That's where it starts.
an upgrade. You've got to start with that stuff. And they're fantastic for understanding this. Will my software support it? Will my devices support it? What about my wireless? Really getting that, because they don't know your network, so they're discovering it for the first time, you see. And that gives them more open eyes, stuff that they're not going to overlook that may be easier for us to overlook, right?
Interesting. So we don't know what we don't know. Into the title of the show, IPv6, is it time? You think it's time?
Yeah, it is time. I'm not a believer that we're ready for pure IPv6 yet.
Yeah.
Because I know Alan, he really likes that stuff, and that's great, man. I'm grateful for that.
But you couldn't go to it that quickly anyway.
No,
so it's
you
not
just
a matter
can't.
of, and so you're not going to wait for it because you'll end up missing something.
But the truth is that when you're looking at the stat that kind of hit me in the face more than any, it was right at the open of the show when he said we're at 0.01%. And in a year, we're at 4% people who went to IPv6.
That's a growth rate.
That's an amazing growth rate. If you kept up that growth rate, in 5 years, you're at 20%. And the one thing we know is that it's not linear like that. It explodes. It's exponential and stuff. So
We're punching into that tool, start seeing which countries are actually accelerating much faster.
It's incredible.
Because it is, and that's a neat tool.
It
that
is
he had
truly
up there as
time.
well.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, listen, that's it for our IPv6 show. Is it time? I think it is time. It's at least time for awareness. So we thank you guys for sticking it out through the entire show. We want to thank all of our guests. We want to thank the crew behind the scenes. As always, please keep up with us. TechWiseTV.com for all the videos. But for behind the scenes, please continue to follow the Facebook page at facebook.com/TechWise. And then the Twitter thing. TechWise,
Twitter
at
thing.
TechWise TV. Easy way to do it. It's probably right there on your screen right now. It should be easy for you reading at home. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'm Rob Boyd. That's
Jimmy Ray Purser.
We're done. We'll see you next time.